In this question, we're given two lines and asked to determine if they could be represented by this equation. What we notice right away is that the two lines are given in standard form, whereas the line that they could represent is given in y equals mx plus b form. So what we have to do is convert this line into either standard form or convert these lines here into y equals mx plus b form. It might be easier to convert these lines into y equals mx plus b form. So let's try that first. So let's start with line 1. What I have to do here is get the y term isolated by itself and also to make sure that it's positive. So to do that, I'm going to move the y term here to the other side of the equation, and what I do then is add both sides of the equation by 2y. So we'd get x minus 2y plus 2y plus 6 equals 0 plus 2y. These two y's cancel out, so we're left with x plus 6 equals 2y. So we've got our positive y, and it doesn't matter if it's on the right side of the equation or the left side of the equation, as long as it's positive. Now what we have to do is get rid of the 2, so I can do that by dividing every term by 2. And here the 2's would cancel. 2 goes into there once, goes into there 3 times. We can also stick a 1 in front of the x here, so what we end up with is 1/2 x plus 3 equals y. Now let's compare this equation here with this one here. And we can see that the y's match, the 3's match, positive 3, but the x's, this is negative 1/2 x and this is positive 1/2 x. Therefore, line 1 cannot be represented by this equation here. So let's try line 2. Again, here we want to isolate the y term and make sure it's positive. So in this case, I've got to get rid of this 3x and get rid of this negative 18 from the left side and move them over to the right side. Let's start by getting rid of the 3x. So we get 3x minus 3x plus 6y minus 18 equals 0 minus 3x. The 3x's would cancel out and we'll be left with 6y minus 18 equals negative 3x. Next, let's get rid of the negative 18. To do that, we would add both sides by 18. So we get plus 18 here equals negative 3x plus 18. The 18's would cancel, and we're left with 6y equals negative 3x plus 18. Next, we have to get rid of the 6, so we divide every term by 6. The 6's would cancel here. That goes into there once and into there twice. 6 goes in there once, goes into there 3 times. So we're left with y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. So let's compare this equation here with this equation, and when we do, we can see that they are absolutely identical. Therefore, we can say that line 2 could be represented by this equation here. And because since only line 2 works, then both lines in this case cannot be an answer. Now there is another way to do this problem. Remember at the beginning we said we could either convert standard form into y equals mx plus b form, which we did, or we can go backwards and convert this into standard form and then compare the equations. So let's try that. We'll take this equation here and rearrange it. To put it in standard form, we'll need to have the x term first, the y term second, the number third, and then it would all equal to 0. So the first thing to do is to move the x term over to the left side. To do that, what I'm going to do is take 1/2 x and add 1/2 x on the right side, and whatever I do to the right I got to do to the left, so this would be 1/2 x plus y. So the half x terms cancel out and we're left with 1/2 x plus y equals 3. Now we got to move the positive 3 to the left side, so to do that I subtract 3 from both sides. And we would go 3 minus 3 on the right, so this would be 1/2 x plus y minus 3. And then of course 3 minus 3 is 0. Next we have to get rid of the fraction here, so we're going to multiply every term by 2. So we get 2 times that term, 2 times that term, 2 times that term, and 2 times that term. Here the 2's would cancel and we'd be left with, let's move it over here, x plus 2y minus 6 equals 0. Now let's compare this equation in standard form to both of our line equations up here. When we do that, we can see that the x's match, but the y term and the number are opposite in sign. Therefore, we know that line 1 is not represented by this equation. Now let's compare line 2. What we notice right away is that the x term here is a single x and this is 3x. So what we have to do to compare these two numbers is multiply this equation by 3, all the terms in the equation by 3. So we 3 times the x term, 3 times the y term, and 3 times the number, and 3 times the value 0. And if we do that, we'd get 3x plus 6y minus 18 equals 0. And if we compare this equation here to this equation here, we can see that they are identical. Therefore, we know that line 2 can be represented by this equation. And of course, since only line 2 works, therefore both cannot be an answer here. So there you go. We've discovered the answer is line 2 using 2 different techniques.